Millionaire CEO attends his father's funeral and discovers the family he never knew. "I didn't come here for your money, Ethan." Lila's voice cut through the desert air like a blade, her dark eyes holding a pain that 15 years couldn't erase. "I came because those two boys deserve to know the truth about their father. Even if he didn't deserve them." Ethan Cross felt the words land like punches to his gut. Standing in that small cafe in Redstone Valley, surrounded by the ghosts of everything he'd abandoned, he finally understood what it meant to be bankrupt. Not financially. He had billions. But in every way that actually mattered. "They're mine, aren't they?" His voice cracked, already knowing the answer. The twin boys he'd seen at the funeral. Noah and Lucas. Lila's laugh was bitter, humorless. "You're a smart man, Ethan. You built an empire from nothing. Surely you can do basic math." "They're 6 years old. You left 7 years ago." The reality hit him like a freight train. He had sons. 2 of them. And for 6 years, he'd been building skyscrapers while they were learning to walk. Closing deals while they spoke their first words. Collecting awards while they started kindergarten. Every birthday. Every scraped knee. Every nightmare. Every triumph. "I wasn't there for any of it, was I?" Lila's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. "No, Ethan. You weren't. And do you know why? Because when I called to tell you I was pregnant, you said, and I quote, 'I can't deal with this right now, Julia. I have investors to meet.' You sent me a check and divorce papers. You chose money over us before you even knew us existed. Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories, where we bring you real-life tales that will move your heart and change your perspective. If you've ever wondered whether success is worth the sacrifice, whether second chances are possible, or what it truly means to be rich, this story will answer those questions in ways you never expected. Hit that subscribe button right now because this channel is growing fast and you don't want to miss stories like this one. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end. Now let me take you back to where this all began, 3 days before that devastating cafe conversation, when Ethan Cross returned to the small town he'd abandoned for the glittering promise of wealth and power. The desert sun beat mercilessly against the black sedan as it carved through the rust-colored landscape of Redwood Valley, New Mexico. Ethan Cross sat rigid in the back seat, his custom Armani suit already feeling oppressive in the afternoon heat. He loosened his tie slightly, staring at the endless expanse of sand and scrub brush that stretched toward distant mountains. A view he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. "Almost there, Mr. Cross." His driver, Marcus, announced from the front seat. Ethan barely registered the words. His mind was elsewhere, trapped between the empire he'd built in Seattle and the memories of a place he'd sworn never to return to. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd conquered 12 states, employed over 2,000 people, and generated revenues that made financial magazines write glowing profiles. Yet he couldn't conquer the guilt that had been gnawing at him for 3 days straight. His grandfather was dead. The man who'd raised him after his parents died in that car accident when he was 8. The man who'd taught him about integrity, hard work, and the value of family. That same man had died alone in a nursing home while Ethan was busy acquiring another property portfolio in Denver. 3 years. It had been 3 years since his last visit, and even then, he'd stayed only 48 hours. Just long enough to write a check and make empty promises about next time. There would be no next time now. As the car approached Suncrest Memorial Grounds, Ethan caught his reflection in the tinted window. At 37, he'd achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish. Cross Realty Holdings was a household name in commercial real estate. His penthouse in Seattle offered views that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. He had everything. So why did the man in the reflection look so hollow? The memorial grounds were already crowded when they arrived. Black-clad figures dotted the landscape like ravens against the pale desert sand. Ethan stepped out of the sedan, and the heat hit him like a physical wall. He'd forgotten how unforgiving New Mexico summers could be. How everything here was raw and exposed, with nowhere to hide. "Mr. Cross, shall I wait here?" Marcus asked. "Yes. This won't take long." But even as he said it, Ethan knew it was a lie. Nothing about coming home was ever quick or simple. He made his way toward the gathering, each step feeling heavier than the last. Faces turned toward him. Faces he recognized from a childhood that felt like someone else's life. Mr. Alvarez from the hardware store, now stooped and gray. The Johnsons who'd lived 3 houses down, their daughter had been his babysitter. Mrs. Chen who'd tried unsuccessfully to teach him piano. They all nodded politely, murmuring condolences. But their eyes held something else. Judgment, perhaps. Or pity for the boy who'd made it big but forgotten where he came from. Ethan. His stepmother Vivian appeared beside him, elegant in a simple black dress. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her posture military straight despite being 72. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." He kissed her cheek, feeling the coolness of her skin. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." "Your grandfather understood." She said it kindly, but they both knew it was a lie. His grandfather had understood nothing about Ethan's choices. They'd argued about it during that last visit. About priorities. About what really mattered in life. "You're building monuments to yourself, boy." His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "But monuments are for dead men. What are you building for the living?" Ethan had dismissed it then as the rambling of an old man who didn't understand modern business. Now, standing at that old man's funeral, the words felt prophetic. "He's with Rose by the cottonwood tree," Vivian said, gesturing across the grounds. "She's been asking for you." His grandmother. At least she'd be happy to see him. Ethan started toward the large cottonwood tree that dominated the eastern edge of the memorial grounds. Its branches spread wide, offering precious shade to the mourners gathered beneath. He could see his grandmother's small frame, supported by someone he couldn't quite make out yet. Then the crowd shifted, and his entire world stopped. Lila Moreno stood beneath that weathered cottonwood tree, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a modest black dress that somehow made her more beautiful than he remembered. Time had been kind to her, adding grace to features he'd once memorized in the dim light of college apartments and stolen moments between classes. But it wasn't Lila who froze the blood in his veins. 2 small boys stood beside her, dressed in matching navy suits that seemed slightly too formal for their young frames. They were identical in every way. Same dark hair that fell across their foreheads. Same serious expressions that seemed too old for children. Same way of tilting their heads when something caught their attention. And when one of them looked up, meeting Ethan's gaze across the crowded memorial ground, he saw his own eyes staring back at him. That distinctive shade of gray-green that his mother used to call storm cloud eyes. The world tilted slightly on its axis. Ethan had built skyscrapers. He'd negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with hardened businessmen who ate competitors for breakfast. He'd stood before shareholders during market crashes without flinching. But in this moment, staring at 2 children who somehow carried his features in their small faces, he forgot how to breathe. One of the boys had his jawline. The other had the same slight dimple in his left cheek that Ethan saw every morning in the mirror when he bothered to really look. Lila noticed his stare. Something flickered across her expression. Not quite fear. Not quite defiance. Something harder to name. She placed protective hands on the boy's shoulders, a gesture so instinctive it spoke of years of practice. Years Ethan knew nothing about. His legs moved without conscious thought, carrying him across the space between them. Each step felt disconnected from his body, like he was watching himself from a great distance. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Impossible to miss. Impossible to deny. Lila. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended, scraped raw by shock and dawning realization. Ethan. She met his gaze steadily, though her hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the children's shoulders. I'm sorry about your grandfather. He was a good man. The words hung between them, loaded with everything unsaid. Unlike his grandson, Ethan heard in the silence. Unlike the man who left. Thank you for coming. Ethan's eyes dropped involuntarily to the boys, who watched him with unsettling intensity. Children that age should fidget. Should grow bored at adult gatherings and tug on their mother's dress asking to leave. These two stood perfectly still, observing him like scientists studying an unfamiliar specimen. This is Noah. Lila said quietly, touching the shoulder of the boy on her right. And Lucas. Her hand moved to the left. Boys, this is Mr. Cross. Mr. Cross. Not your father. Not even an old friend. Just a stranger in an expensive suit. Hello, sir. They said in perfect unison, their voices high and uncertain. Ethan's throat constricted. Sir. His own children, because surely, impossibly, that's what they were, called him sir. Hello. He managed, acutely aware that every eye at the memorial had turned toward this reunion. Small towns never forgot, and Redwood Valley had the memory of an elephant. Everyone here knew about Ethan and Lila. The college sweethearts who'd planned a future together. The young couple who'd talked about building a life in this very town before ambition came knocking with its seductive promises. We should let you get back to your family. Lila said, already turning away, already protecting her boys from whatever storm she saw brewing in Ethan's eyes. Again, our condolences. Wait. Ethan's hand shot out, stopping just short of touching her arm. Years of training in reading people, in negotiating, in knowing when to push and when to retreat, all of it failed him now. Lila, please. We need to talk. She studied him for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. The boys looked up at their mother, confusion evident in their identical expressions. They didn't understand the tension crackling in the air between the adults, but they felt it. Juniper Leaf Cafe. She finally said, her voice carefully neutral. Tomorrow afternoon. 2 o'clock. Before Ethan could respond, before he could process or question or demand the answers that were burning through his mind, she guided the boys away. They walked toward the parking area, three figures retreating into the afternoon glare. Just before disappearing around a row of cars, Lucas, or was it Noah, glanced back over his shoulder. His small voice carried on the desert wind, innocent and devastating. Mom, why does he look like us? Lila's response was lost to distance, but Ethan saw her kneel down, pulling both boys close, her lips moving in explanation he couldn't hear. Then they were gone, swallowed by heat, shimmer and dust and the weight of years that had passed in silence. Ethan stood motionless, surrounded by mourners offering comfort he couldn't process. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Probably his assistant with urgent matters that suddenly seemed meaningless. Somewhere behind him, a eulogy was beginning. His grandmother would be looking for him, expecting him to say a few words about the man who'd shaped his childhood. But all Ethan could think about was tomorrow at 2 o'clock, when a conversation 15 years overdue would finally happen. When he would learn how a man could build an empire yet remain completely bankrupt in everything that truly mattered. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in his childhood bedroom in his grandmother's house, staring at ceiling tiles he'd memorized decades ago. The room hadn't changed much. Same blue walls. Same bookshelf filled with science fiction novels he'd devoured as a teenager. Same window that looked out over the backyard where his grandfather had taught him to throw a baseball. But everything else had changed. Everything. His mind kept circling back to those two boys. 6 years old, Lila had said. Or implied. The math was simple. Devastating. He'd left 7 years ago, right after their divorce was finalized. Left without looking back, convinced he was doing the right thing. The smart thing. The ambitious thing. His phone lit up on the nightstand. Another message from his assistant Jennifer. The Portland deal was closing tomorrow, needed his signature. The Shanghai investors wanted a video conference. The board was concerned about his extended absence. All of it felt like noise. Static from a life that suddenly seemed very far away. Ethan got up, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt. He walked through the quiet house, past family photos that chronicled a history he'd been too busy to be part of. His grandmother asleep in her room. Vivian in the guest room. And him, the prodigal grandson, wandering like a ghost through the life he'd abandoned. He found himself in his grandfather's study. The room smelled of old books and pipe tobacco, though his grandfather had quit smoking 20 years ago. The scent lingered anyway, embedded in the furniture, the curtains, the memories. Ethan's eyes fell on the desk, and sitting prominently in the center was a leather-bound journal. His grandfather's journal. Vivian must have left it there, knowing he'd find it. He opened it, and his grandfather's familiar handwriting filled the pages. Neat, precise letters that formed thoughts and observations about life, family, regret. Ethan flipped through, not really reading, until one entry stopped him cold. It was dated 3 years ago, right after his last visit. Ethan came home today. Stayed less than 2 days. Wrote me a check like that could make up for his absence. He's so much like his father it scares me. My son built a successful law practice but forgot he had a family until it was too late. Now Ethan is doing the same thing. Building his monuments. Collecting his trophies. Missing everything that matters. Success without family is just a quiet house. I've tried to tell him, but he doesn't hear me anymore. Maybe he never did. The words blurred as tears filled Ethan's eyes. His grandfather had seen it. Had known. Had tried to warn him. And Ethan had dismissed him. Brushed off his concerns as the worries of an old man who didn't understand the modern world. Who didn't grasp the opportunities available to someone with Ethan's drive and vision. But his grandfather had understood perfectly. He'd just been looking at a different measure of success. One that couldn't be quantified in revenue reports or property acquisitions. Ethan closed the journal carefully, reverently. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, he'd face the full cost of his choices. Tomorrow, he'd learn what 6 years of absence had stolen from him. What could never be bought back, no matter how many billions he accumulated. The next morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ethan attended the formal memorial service, shook hands, accepted condolences, delivered a eulogy that felt hollow even as people praised it. He said all the right things about his grandfather's legacy, his wisdom, his love. But all he could think about was the cafe. 2 o'clock. Lila. The twins. The truth. He arrived at Juniper Leaf Cafe 15 minutes early. It was a small place on Main Street, the kind of local establishment that served coffee and homemade pie and knew everyone's order by heart. Ethan had never been here before. It hadn't existed when he'd lived in Redwood Valley. He chose a table by the window, ordered coffee he didn't want, and waited. Lila arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. Alone. She'd left the boys with someone, probably his grandmother. She slid into the seat across from him, her expression guarded but not hostile. Not friendly either. Just carefully neutral, like she'd practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Ethan. She said simply. Lila. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, needing something to hold on to. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. She admitted. But you deserve to know the truth, I suppose. And she paused, her voice catching slightly. They deserve to know their father. Even if he hasn't earned that title. The word stung, but Ethan didn't flinch. Are they mine? Lila's eyes flashed with something hot and angry. Don't insult me, Ethan. You saw them. You know they're yours. They have your eyes. Your smile. Noah has your stubborn streak, and Lucas has your curiosity about how everything works. They're yours in every way that matters except the one that actually counts. Being there. How did you, Ethan couldn't form the question. When did I know I was pregnant? Lila's laugh was bitter. About 6 weeks after you filed for divorce. I called you. Do you remember? Ethan's mind raced back, trying to recall. There had been a call. He remembered being in his office, pacing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle. She'd been crying, saying something about needing to talk. And he'd been, what had he said? The memory surfaced like a stone in his chest. I can't deal with this right now, Julia. I have investors meeting me in 20 minutes. Can this wait? She tried to tell him it was important. That it couldn't wait. And he'd cut her off. Look, I'll send you some money, okay? Whatever you need. I have to go. He'd hung up. Sent her a transfer for $5,000. And never called back. Oh God. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. You tried to tell me. I tried. Lila confirmed, her composure cracking slightly. I tried 3 more times. But your number changed. Your assistant started screening your calls. You built walls, Ethan. Tall ones. And I was on the wrong side. Why couldn't you have, he didn't know what he was asking. What? Shown up at your office? Camped outside your building? I had twin boys to care for, Ethan. I was working 2 jobs just to keep us fed. I didn't have time to chase down a man who'd made it abundantly clear he wanted nothing to do with me. I didn't know. The word sounded pathetic even to his own ears. About the twins. I swear, Lila, if I'd known. Would it have changed anything? She challenged. 1 baby wasn't worth staying for. Would 2 have made the difference? Or would you have sent a bigger check and kept building your empire? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Because truthfully, honestly, Ethan didn't know. The man he'd been 7 years ago might have made the same choice. Might have convinced himself that providing financially was enough. That being present wasn't as important as being successful. Tell me about them. He said quietly. Please. I want to know everything. Lila's expression softened slightly, the way it always did when she thought about her boys. Noah is the serious one. He's protective, especially of Lucas. He wants to be a doctor when he grows up because, and I quote, people need help and I want to help them. She smiled at the memory. Lucas is the dreamer. He takes everything apart to see how it works. Last month he disassembled my coffee maker to understand the mechanics. He's brilliant with puzzles, with patterns. He sees the world differently. They sound amazing. Ethan said, meaning it. They are. Lila's voice held fierce pride. They're kind and smart and funny. They ask a million questions and give the best hugs, and they've never once complained about not having a father because they didn't know they were missing one. She looked directly at Ethan. I told them their father had to leave for work. That it wasn't their fault. That you, loved them but couldn't be there. Why would you tell them that? Ethan asked, genuinely confused. Why protect me? I wasn't protecting you. Lila said firmly. I was protecting them. Children shouldn't grow up thinking they weren't wanted. That they weren't enough. So I lied. I told them you were working far away. That someday, maybe, you'd come back. And now I'm here. Now you're here. She agreed. At a funeral. By accident. If your grandfather hadn't died, would you ever have come back? Would you ever have known? The honest answer was probably not. And they both knew it. If you enjoyed this story so far, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps this channel grow and brings these powerful stories to more people. Don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Steven's Stories for more content that will move you. Now let's continue with Ethan's journey. What do you want from me? Ethan asked. Money? I can provide. I want to provide for them. Set up trust funds, education accounts, whatever they need. I don't want your money, Ethan. Lila's voice was quiet but firm. I've raised them for 6 years without it. We're not rich, but we're fine. We have what we need. Then what? What can I do? You can decide whether you want to be their father or just their benefactor. Because those are two very different things. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. If you want to be part of their lives, truly part of their lives, that means being present. It means showing up for school plays and soccer games and bedtime stories. It means being there when Lucas has a nightmare or when Noah struggles with math homework. It means consistency, Ethan. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts. Just showing up, day after day, even when it's inconvenient. I want that. Ethan said immediately. I want to be their father. Do you? Lila challenged. Because wanting it in theory and actually doing it are completely different. You have a company to run. Properties across 12 states. A life in Seattle. What happens when the novelty wears off? When being a father interferes with a business deal? When they need you and you have a meeting? I'll make it work. Ethan insisted, though even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Lila shook her head slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. That you'll try to make it work, realize it's harder than you thought, and disappear again. And this time, it won't just be me you're hurting. It'll be 2 little boys who finally got to know their father only to watch him leave again. Her words cut deep because they contained truth. Ethan had no track record of putting people before business. No evidence that he could change. Just good intentions and 7 years of absence. What do I have to do? He asked. To prove I'm serious? Start small. Lila decided after a moment. Spend time with them. Let them get to know you. No promises about the future, no big declarations. Just time. Consistency. We'll see where it goes from there. When can I see them? Tomorrow. Dinner at my house. 6 o'clock. She wrote the address on a napkin and slid it across the table. Don't be late, Ethan. And don't bring expensive presents. Just bring yourself. I'll be there. We'll see. Lila stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you do this, if you start building a relationship with them, you can't back out. You can't decide in 6 months that it's too hard or too complicated or too inconvenient. Because I won't let you hurt them. Do you understand? I understand. I hope so. She said softly. For their sake, I really hope so. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone with his coffee and the crushing weight of responsibility he'd avoided for 6 years. The next evening, Ethan stood outside a modest 2-story house in one of Redwood Valley's older neighborhoods. He'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on simple jeans and a button-down shirt. Nothing too formal. Nothing that screamed wealth and distance. In his hands, he held only what Lila had allowed. Himself. No gifts, no grand gestures. Just a nervous father about to meet his sons for the second time. The first time as their father, not a stranger at a funeral. He knocked. Footsteps thundered from inside, young and energetic. The door flew open, and Lucas stood there, eyes wide with recognition. "You're the man from the funeral," he announced. "Mom said you were coming for dinner." "That's right," Ethan replied, his voice catching slightly. I'm Ethan. I know who you are," Lucas said matter-of-factly. "You're our dad. Mom told us this morning." Before Ethan could respond, Noah appeared behind his brother, more reserved, watching Ethan with careful eyes that seemed far too old for a 6-year-old. "Hi," Noah said simply. His tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't welcoming either. "Just wait and see," his expression seemed to say. "Words are easy. Let's see what you actually do." "Hi, Noah." "Hi, Lucas." Ethan knelt down to their eye level, a gesture that felt both natural and terrifying. "Thank you for letting me come to dinner. Mom made lasagna," Lucas offered. "It's really good. She makes it for special occasions." "Am I a special occasion?" Ethan asked gently. Lucas shrugged. "Mom said you're important. That you want to get to know us. Is that true?" "Yes," Ethan said honestly. "Very true." "Why?" Noah asked bluntly. "You didn't want to know us before." The question hit like a physical blow. 6 years old, and already cutting through pretense to the heart of the matter. "You're right," Ethan admitted, seeing Lila appear behind the boys, listening. "I made a terrible mistake. I wasn't there before, and I'm so sorry for that. But I'd like to try to be here now. If you'll let me." Noah considered this carefully. "Do you know how to play Lego?" "No," Ethan confessed. "But I'd like to learn." Something shifted in Noah's expression. A tiny crack in his armor. "Lucas is better at it than me, but I'm getting good. Maybe I could show you." "I'd like that very much." Dinner that night was awkward but not awful. Ethan sat at Lila's modest kitchen table, eating homemade lasagna that was indeed delicious, listening to the twins talk about school, their friends, their favorite shows. He learned that Noah was afraid of thunderstorms but wouldn't admit it. That Lucas could identify 50 different types of rocks. That they shared a bedroom and sometimes fought over who got the top bunk but always made up before bed. He learned that Lila had worked as a nurse while going to night school to get her teaching certificate. That she now taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. That she'd built a life here, rooted in community and purpose, while he'd been chasing profits in Seattle. After dinner, Lucas dragged Ethan to their bedroom to show him the Lego city they'd been building for months. It sprawled across half the floor, intricate and detailed, with buildings and roads and tiny people going about their plastic lives. "This is the hospital where Mom works," Lucas explained, pointing to a red and white structure. "And this is our school. And this is the rocket ship I'm going to fly to Mars someday." "That's amazing," Ethan said, genuinely impressed. "You built all this yourselves?" "Mom helped sometimes," Noah admitted, joining them. "But mostly us." Ethan spent an hour on that bedroom floor, helping add pieces to the city, listening to the twins explain their creation. It was such a small thing. Such an ordinary thing. But it felt more real, more important, than any boardroom presentation he'd ever delivered. When it was time to leave, Lucas hugged him suddenly, impulsively, wrapping small arms around Ethan's waist. "Will you come back?" he asked, voice muffled against Ethan's shirt. "If it's okay with your mom and with you guys, I'd like to." Very much. Okay. Lucas released him and ran back to the Lego city. Noah approached more slowly, offering his hand for a formal shake. Thank you for coming, mister, he paused. What should we call you? Ethan knelt down again. What would you like to call me? Noah shrugged. Mom said we could call you Ethan. Or Dad. Whichever feels right. Let's start with Ethan. Ethan suggested gently. And see where it goes from there. Is that okay? Noah nodded, seeming relieved that he didn't have to force intimacy he didn't feel yet. That's okay. At the door, Lila walked Ethan out to his car. That went well. She observed. They liked you. They're wonderful. Ethan said honestly. You've done an incredible job with them, Lila. We're not done yet. She reminded him. This is just the beginning. The easy part, actually. Wait until they test you. Wait until you have to choose between them and something else you want. I'll choose them. We'll see. Her skepticism was clear but not cruel. Actions, Ethan. Not words. Over the following weeks, Ethan began restructuring his entire life. He delegated responsibilities at Cross Realty Holdings that he'd never trusted anyone else to handle. He promoted his VP to handle day-to-day operations. He declined the Portland acquisition, shocking his board of directors. Jennifer, his assistant of 8 years, watched these changes with barely concealed amazement. You're turning down the Shanghai deal? She asked, phone in hand, ready to relay his decision. Mr. Cross, that's potentially our biggest international expansion. I know. Ethan replied calmly. Tell them we're not interested. But you've been working on this for 2 years. And now I'm working on something more important. He placed a framed photo on his desk. The twins, laughing at something off camera, their faces bright with joy. Jennifer stared at the photo. Since when do you have children? Since always. Ethan said quietly. I just didn't know it. He began spending 3 days a week in Redwood Valley, staying at his grandmother's house, building routines with the twins. Wednesday dinners became sacred. Weekend mornings meant pancakes at Lila's house, with Lucas measuring ingredients with scientific precision and Noah insisting on adding chocolate chips. Ethan attended Noah's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines alongside other parents who initially looked at him with suspicion. The rich CEO slumming it in small-town sports. But his enthusiasm was genuine, his pride unmistakable when Noah scored his first goal of the season. The boy jogged over at halftime, sweaty and beaming. Did you see that? Noah asked breathlessly. Incredible footwork. Ethan replied, his heart swelling with a pride he'd never experienced in any business success. You completely outmaneuvered that defender. Noah's smile widened. Coach says I'm getting better. Coach is right. It was such a small moment. A snippet of conversation between a father and son at a youth soccer game. But to Ethan, it felt monumental. Like he was finally getting something right. Lucas connected with him differently, through questions and curiosity. He wanted to know everything about how things worked, and Ethan found himself researching topics he'd never considered just to answer his son's endless inquiries. How do airplanes stay up? Lucas asked one evening. Ethan pulled up videos and diagrams, and they spent 2 hours exploring aerodynamics, lift, thrust, and drag. Lucas absorbed it all like a sponge, his eyes bright with fascination. So the wings push air down, which pushes the plane up. Lucas summarized. Exactly. Ethan confirmed. Cool. Can we build a model airplane? They did. Spent a whole Saturday afternoon assembling a balsa wood glider that promptly crashed into Lila's rose bushes on its maiden flight. They laughed until their sides hurt, and Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this alive. But not everything was smooth. There were challenges, tests of his commitment exactly as Lila had predicted. 6 weeks into his new routine, a crisis erupted at Cross Realty Holdings. A major property acquisition in Denver was falling apart, potentially costing the company millions. His board demanded his immediate presence in Seattle for emergency meetings. The call came on a Wednesday. Dinner night with the twins. Ethan sat in his grandmother's living room, phone in hand, staring at the calendar. He'd promised Noah he'd help with his science project tonight. Lucas was expecting him to read the next chapter of their book. Jennifer's voice on the phone was urgent. "Mr. Cross, the board is insistent. If you're not in Seattle tomorrow morning, the deal collapses." Then it collapses. Ethan heard himself say. "Excuse me? I have commitments here, Jennifer. Important ones. The board will have to handle this without me." "But Mr. Cross, this is millions of dollars." "I understand. And I'm saying no. Handle it without me. You're more than capable." He hung up before she could protest further. His hands shook slightly. Years of conditioning screamed at him that he was making a mistake. That he was throwing away opportunities, damaging his company, being irresponsible. But when he showed up at Lila's house that evening, and Lucas ran to the door yelling that Ethan was here and they could start the project now, all those doubts evaporated. This was the right choice. The only choice that mattered. Lila noticed something different in him that night. After the twins were in bed, she made coffee and they sat on her back porch under a sky full of stars. "You turned down something big today, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "How did you know?" "I can see it in your face. The war between who you were and who you're trying to become." She paused. "What did you sacrifice?" "A property deal in Denver," Ethan admitted. "Probably cost the company $8 million. And you chose dinner with the boys instead." "I chose family instead." Lila studied him in the moonlight. "That must have been hard." "Easier than I expected," Ethan said honestly. "A year ago, even 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been capable of it. But today, when Jennifer called, all I could think about was Lucas waiting for me to read Chapter 7. Noah expecting help with his volcano model. I couldn't disappoint them. Not for any amount of money." Something shifted in Lila's expression. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of it. "You're changing," she observed. "I'm trying." "Keep trying," she said softly. "They notice. Even when you think they don't, they notice." 2 months into his new life, Ethan's commitment was tested again. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity emerged. A partnership with an international development firm that could triple Cross Realty Holdings' value. Make him one of the wealthiest developers in North America. The catch? It required relocation to Singapore for 2 years. Minimum. Ethan sat in the conference room via video call, watching his board of directors practically salivate over the proposal. His CFO presented projections. His legal team outlined contracts. Everyone assumed he'd jump at this chance. The old Ethan would have. Without hesitation. But the new Ethan, the one who knew what Lucas's laugh sounded like and how Noah's face lit up when he understood a math problem, that Ethan saw the hidden cost immediately. 2 years away from his sons. Missing ages 6 through 8. Missing soccer seasons and school plays and bedtime stories and all the small, crucial moments that build a childhood. "I need to think about it," Ethan said, shocking the room into silence. "Think about it?" his CFO repeated. "Ethan, you can't be serious. This is the opportunity of our careers. And I said I need to think about it. Give me 48 hours. He drove to Lila's house that evening, unannounced. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, clearly not expecting company. "Ethan. Is everything okay? Can we talk?" They sat on her porch again, their de facto place for difficult conversations. Ethan explained the Singapore offer. The potential. The cost. The impossible choice. Lila listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "What do you want me to say?" she finally asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. I needed to tell someone who would understand what I'm giving up either way." "You're asking the wrong question," Lila said gently. "It's not about what you're giving up. It's about what you're choosing. And only you can decide what matters more." "I know what matters more," Ethan said quietly. "I'm just terrified I'll regret walking away from this opportunity." "Will you?" Lila challenged. "In 5 years, in 10 years, will you really regret choosing your children over money? Or will you regret the reverse?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable and yet completely clear. "I've already made billions," Ethan said slowly, working through it out loud. "I've already achieved more than I ever dreamed. But I've only been a father for 2 months. I've only had 60 days with my sons. How can I walk away now?" "Then don't." Lila's voice was soft but firm. "Don't walk away. Choose them, Ethan. Not because I'm telling you to, but because it's what you actually want." He looked at her in the moonlight, this woman who'd carried his children and raised them alone and somehow didn't hate him for it. "I'm going to turn it down," he declared. "The Singapore deal. All of it. I'm going to stay here." "Are you sure?" "No." Ethan laughed, but it was honest, freeing. "I'm not sure at all. But I'm going to do it anyway." The next day, Ethan declined the Singapore partnership. His board was furious. 2 directors resigned in protest. His stock price dipped. Financial magazines that had praised him now questioned his judgment. Ethan didn't care. Because that Saturday, he taught Lucas how to ride a bike. Ran alongside him holding the seat, letting go when Lucas found his balance, cheering when his son pedaled independently for the first time. And that night, when Noah crawled into his lap and asked if Ethan would always be there, Ethan could answer honestly. "Yes. I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Noah studied him seriously. "You mean it?" "I mean it. No more choosing work over you guys. You're what matters. You and Lucas and your mom. You're my family." "Even though we're not married?" Noah asked with 6-year-old logic. "Especially because you're not married." Ethan smiled. "This isn't about legal papers. It's about love. And I love you boys more than anything in this world." Noah hugged him fiercely. "I love you too." Then, quieter. "Dad." The word hung in the air like a benediction. Ethan's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. Over the following months, Ethan's transformation became undeniable. He relocated his primary office to New Mexico, working remotely when necessary but staying present. He learned to cook lasagna under Lila's patient instruction. He became a regular at the twin school, volunteering for field trips and parent-teacher conferences. The local community, initially skeptical, began to accept him. Not as the rich CEO slumming it, but as Noah and Lucas's dad. As the guy who helped coach soccer and showed up to school fundraisers and knew the names of all the other parents. His grandmother Rose watched all this with quiet satisfaction. One evening, as Ethan helped her with dishes after dinner, she spoke the truth he needed to hear. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said simply. "Not of your money or your company. But of this. Of you finally understanding what matters." I wish I'd figured it out sooner. Ethan admitted. Before he died. He knew. Rose assured him. Those last few months, he talked about you changing. Becoming the man he always hoped you'd be. He died knowing you'd find your way home. The words broke something loose in Ethan's chest. A knot of guilt and grief he'd been carrying. He cried in his grandmother's kitchen, and she held him like she had when he was 8 and newly orphaned, whispering that it was going to be okay. As summer approached, the twins' 7th birthday loomed. Lila asked what Ethan wanted to do for them. Something simple. He suggested. Something about family, not expensive presents. They planned a backyard party at Lila's house. Invitations went out to school friends, neighbors, the soccer team. Ethan helped string lights and set up tables. Lucas and Noah bounced with excitement, planning games and activities. The day of the party was perfect. Clear blue sky, warm but not oppressive. The backyard filled with children's laughter, parents chatting, the smell of grilled burgers. Ethan manned the grill, wearing a ridiculous apron the twins had given him that read "World's okayest dad." He watched Noah playing tag with friends. Watched Lucas showing other kids his rock collection. Watched Lila moving through the gathering with easy grace, making sure everyone had food and drinks and felt welcome. This was it. This was success. Not boardrooms or revenue reports. This. Love and laughter and belonging. As the sun began to set and they prepared to cut the cake, Ethan found himself standing beside Lila, watching their sons blow out 7 candles while everyone sang. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Lila asked. "For giving me a second chance. For raising them when I wasn't there. For not shutting me out when I finally showed up. For everything." Lila's hand found his, squeezing gently. "You're doing the work, Ethan. You're showing up. That's what matters." After the party, after the guests had left and the twins were in bed, sugar crashed and happy, Ethan helped Lila clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, picking up paper plates and wrapping leftovers. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan ventured as they finished. "Sure. Do you think, could we?" His courage failed him momentarily. "I know I have no right to ask. But I want to be a family. A real family. Not just a father who visits but someone who's truly part of your lives." Lila set down the dish towel, turning to face him fully. "What are you asking, Ethan?" "I'm asking if you'd consider giving us another chance. Not rushing into anything, but dating again. Getting to know each other as the people we are now, not the kids we were in college. Building something real and lasting for the boys' sake and for ours." Lila was quiet for a long moment. 7 years ago, she finally said, "You walked away from us. From me. You chose your career, your ambition, your independence. And it nearly destroyed me. I know." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "And I'm so sorry. Let me finish." She continued. 7 years ago, you made that choice. But these past few months, I've watched you make different choices. Better ones. I've watched you put the boys first, even when it cost you. I've watched you build relationships instead of empires. I've watched you become the man I always hoped you could be. And?" Ethan hardly dared to breathe. "And I think maybe, possibly, we could try. Slowly. Carefully. With the understanding that the boys come first and if this doesn't work, we have to stay civil for their sake. I can live with that." Lila smiled, really smiled, for the first time since his return. "Then yes, Ethan Cross. We can try." He wanted to kiss her, to pull her close, but he held back. This was too important to rush. Too precious to risk. Instead, he simply took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Thank you. For everything. For them. For this chance. I won't waste it. I know. Lila said softly. That's why I'm saying yes. 6 months later, at Noah and Lucas's school winter concert, Ethan sat in the audience beside Lila, their hands intertwined. The twins stood on stage with their classmates, singing slightly off-key but with tremendous enthusiasm. Vivian sat on Ethan's other side, having driven in from her new condo in Santa Fe. Rose beamed from Lila's left, having knitted scarves for both boys that they'd worn proudly despite the mild weather. This is my family, Ethan realized. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and present and worth every sacrifice. After the concert, as they gathered for hot chocolate at Juniper Leaf Cafe, Lucas climbed into Ethan's lap. Dad, he said, the word now natural and unremarkable. Can you help me with my Mars colony project tomorrow? Absolutely. What time? After school. Noah said he'll help too. It's going to be epic. Epic sounds perfect. Lila caught Ethan's eye across the table, her smile warm and genuine. He smiled back, no longer haunted by regret but filled with gratitude for the second chance he'd almost missed. That night, as Ethan drove back to his grandmother's house, he didn't think about the deals he'd turned down or the opportunities he'd sacrificed. He thought about Lucas's laugh when his cake tower collapsed. About Noah's pride when he scored the winning goal last week. About Lila's hand in his. He thought about success measured not in dollars but in moments. In showing up. In being present. In choosing love over ambition, family over fortune. His phone rang. Jennifer, calling about some urgent matter that probably wasn't actually urgent. Ethan sent it to voicemail. Some things could wait. But bedtime stories and soccer games and lazy Sunday mornings with his family, those couldn't. Those were the real treasures, the actual measure of a life well lived. And for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Cross felt truly, completely rich. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about what really matters in life, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs this message. Subscribe to Mr. Stephen Stories for more powerful narratives about love, redemption, and second chances. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in Ethan's position. Your engagement helps this channel grow and brings these important stories to more people who need to hear them. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember that success without family is just a quiet house, but a house filled with love is the truest wealth of all.